Loving yourself means when you're, doing things that are good for you, even when it's hard, going to bed on time and like taking care of your body, taking care of your space, taking care of your emotional, disposition and whatever, and like tending to yourself, doing things that are good for you.
I was trying to think even about what we talked about when we met. Whoa. So that would have been 2015 or so. I don't even remember when that was in Austin.
In Austin, yeah. I think I've seen you twice. It once was in Austin, and then once was in New York.
Yeah, we did like a thing at Soho House or something after one of my book launches,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know what we talked about in Austin. You exposed me to Topo Chico. I had my first and only Topo Chico with you.
Well, so much has changed in the sparkling water game since then. Now, sort of everything is sparkling water, and everyone has their own. I just had a Topo Chico myself. It's I would say it's my favorite, but now there's some that have rainwater. Whatever. It's actually a good illustration of like in our lifetime of how marketing just creates made up shit that then makes people want it. Do you know what I mean? Like you watch how you have to distinguish yourself from, regular water and then sparkling water. And then how inside the sparkling water market do I make up things that people will want? It's going to be in this bottle. It's going to be glass. It's going to have this kind of, you watch it get manufactured in front of you.
Yeah. What I find interesting is how almost like it goes back to the almost like, when people had a craft or whatever, but like the way that people look at the world sometimes is influenced by like their training or where they come from or whatever else.
Sure.
Like, obviously you have an extensive background in marketing and advertising. And so you're going to see the gears of that churning probably first or among first. And it reminds me, I got a manicure, and the person working on my hands, she asked me, she's like, you're a writer or a musician. And I was like, oh, right. That's how, she's completely right, because she was like deducing my life. Yeah. Based on my hands. And that's how she was sort of like seeing people and seeing the world. I just think it's fascinating, like how, people's backgrounds and people's, trades even can like, dictate how they see things.
No, that's totally right. You develop like a sort of a point of view or frame of reference early in life, and then professionally, you cultivate that thing. So like a comedian is always going to be someone who has a certain amount of perception, a certain knack for finding what's funny. And then as you understand how the market works and how the actual act of performing on stage works, you start to get like confirmation bias to your benefit. Like you see the things that you can use because you now have a need for those.
Oh, interesting. You think there's like a heightened awareness to things that would be beneficial to notice?
Yeah, of course. It's like when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, but like to your benefit. Like you're able to perceive things that you can use. Like when I read books, I read for pleasure. Obviously, I read to learn, but then I also have this eye, which I cultivated as a research assistant. But now, knowing what goes into a book, I'm like, that is a story that I can use. So like I have, and you have, I imagine like, let's say a musician, like they're fucking around on the guitar. There's going to be some like light that goes off in their head when they hear 3 or 4 notes together that they're like, oh, that is the genesis of a song, right?
Sure. I think, but sometimes though, some of that recognition is done way, way, way later. Like, it won't be until sometimes months or years after the fact, sometimes where I'm writing about something, I'm thinking about something, and then a certain reference or a certain, analogy or a certain parable comes to mind, and you start to realize, oh, how appropriate that is. Yeah, I guess that's true. I don't know what I'm trying to argue necessarily, but I guess that's interesting.
Well, I find that like, so when I read, like, I'm always like, oh, I like this, I like this, I like this. I just collect it. And then once I know what I want, like, then I'm like, okay, I'm writing a book about X. I go back through everything I find, and I found stuff that works for that idea that I collected before I knew I was looking for that thing.
Right.
So it's all floating around. Like if your special's around a theme, you probably think back to jokes that were throwaways, like from 3 years ago, that suddenly work for that theme. And so you didn't know you were cute, you were inching your way towards there, but you sort of subconsciously were.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And but I also think that like, yeah, there is sometimes it maybe works the other way where the things that have worked or would work are the kinds of, subjects or perspectives or, sort of idiosyncrasies that you can observe, the things that would work maybe like I guess I'm in a place now where I think I'm finding like the things that I'm noticing are actually sort of contradictory to the types of things that maybe like the aggregator would want in my mind. And so it creates like this sort of upending, and maybe that's growth, and maybe that is, challenging my own sort of frame of reference. But it's like sometimes the things that I find myself noticing or reacting to or relating to or being moved towards are things that somewhat or sometimes completely contradict or negate or challenge the precepts that kind of maybe would facilitate what I was used to doing. And so I think that, again, I don't know if that's like artistic growth, if that's an inherent limitation of comedy, like maybe like the idea that something has to end in a punchline is inherently limiting. Like if you were writing a book and you're like every sentence or every paragraph has to come back around or generate the visual or logical clash that is required for comedy to emerge, then you would be, it's like, you both hands tied behind your back, where it's just like you can't really get to what you're trying to get to if everything has to be stuck in this one thing. And so as somebody who I think I got into comedy not necessarily to make people laugh or to even be the funniest, but because I had certain things that I thought about and wanted to talk about and explore. And I think for a while there was a way to do that, on the basis of comedy. But I think like as time goes on, that just feels more and more limiting. And the things that I find myself recognizing, and the things the patterns that I see in the world, and the things that I deduce as true are not necessarily congruent to like joke structure or whatever else. I think sometimes they sometimes completely defy joke structure.
Back in the ancient world, philosophy wasn't abstract, it wasn't theoretical, it was designed to help you live the best life. In Stoicism 101, we have a 2-week course that will introduce you into philosophy, that will make you a better person. There's interviews with me, daily lessons that will challenge you to be better, give you new ways of thinking, tackling the problems of life, becoming your best self. As Marcus Aurelius says, you could be good today, but instead you choose tomorrow. Epictetus says, how much longer are you going to wait to demand the best for yourself? Check out our new course, Stoicism 101, at dailystoic.com/101.
Well, like, I think it's probably short-term maladaptive, right? Because like, if you're like a character, if instead of being a person, you're like a comedian character who only looks for the world in terms of like redneck jokes or this kind of joke or whatever, then like to have the opposite of tunnel vision is maladaptive, right? Because you're sort of going through, and instead of seeing just what you can use, you're seeing all sorts of stuff. But it is much more intellectually honest and more likely to allow for long-term growth, long-term connection, and probably, I think, ultimately, a more diverse audience, right? Because, like for instance, with Stoicism, I was initially interested in its impact on sort of personal development, personal growth, like productivity and like what how it would help you as an individual. But increasingly, I've been much more interested in what the philosophy sort of offers and demands, sort of ethically, collectively, politically, etc. Now, the irony is this is coming at exactly the time that the audience is biggest, and the audience has grown primarily because people are interested in productivity and resiliency and all the personal stuff. So it's this clash where, like, if you were just delivering straight down the middle stuff, it would be better for you in the short term, but it would also be, I think, creatively bankrupt, and then in some ways morally bankrupt, but also I think have a shorter shelf life because it is artificially constrained, and you would also burn out with it faster.
Right. Well, I think what you're talking about, and forgive me if I'm misinterpreting, but like it's sort of, I think it's similar. I think we're similar in the sense that trying to align the professional and personal pursuits so that they are not necessarily at odds with one another. I mean, I guess there's like an inherent, static when it comes to like pursuing truth or pursuing, in your case, a very specific, discipline of truth, or study of it. And then obviously with the necessities of commercialization and monetization and stuff like that. It's funny. I don't know if you, how much of my world you catch wind of, but it kind of in the vein of the clash of Stoicism or comedy and the kind of marketplace. I don't know if he is doing this with a wink. I don't think he is, but Chris Rock has a new tour that he's going on, and the name of it is called Ego Death. And so his poster says Ego Death World Tour. And to me, it's just like, that's too ironic and too hilarious to not be a joke, but I don't think it is a joke. Like, I think it is earnestly saying Ego Death, but it is the world tour. And it's just like Ego Death World Tour to me is the funniest. That's like a David Foster Wallace thing. Like, that's not supposed to happen. That's supposed to be, what the past viewed as like the sort of parody or satirical outcome of this modality. And it's like Zen Buddhism, the ride. It's like, it's just not.
Well, I was thinking about that the other day. I was playing with my kids, and I was laying down upstairs, and we have this game room, and like we have some posters from my books. Like, like when you do a book signing, they give you like a big cutout of the thing. And I was like, hey, can I have that? And they were like, we're just going to throw it away. So I have it on the wall. And I noticed, it caught me that on my first book to like where I am now, my name has gotten bigger on each book. Right. When right in the middle, one of those books is Ego is the Enemy. And then I was like, well, is that symbolic? And then I was like, but actually also it's a market thing, right? Because like when I published 0 books, the thing that mattered was the title of the book. Like, is the title of this book interesting?
Right. Now it's like, after
I'd sold more books, now it's a tension between, is the title drawing the reader, or is the fact that I also have fans who exist in the world, and they would be more like, are they going to be interested in a book on stillness? Like, thinking about the overlapping diagrams, is a book called Stillness is the Key going to sell, attract the audience, sell better? Stillness is the Key, name of author, you have to like zoom in to see, or is it going to be, I've liked previous books from this person and I want to, so it's this weird tension, right? And actually my publisher on Ego is the Enemy, they were like, what if we did this thing where like sort of an artistic statement, your name wasn't on the cover? And I was like, well, first of all, it kind of sucks because I wrote it, right? Like the painter should sign their work. It's not an egotistical thing. It's just like own your shit. But also, like, is that better? Like, which is a better business decision, right? Like at brass, not even business. What is a better getting people to read a book, which instinctually they don't want to read? And so you have that tension of like, because it's a capitalistic commercial thing, it's not just what makes sense artistically or philosophically, it's also like what will work to deliver the medicine.
Right. The logical extension of your name getting bigger is like the book tour becomes like an arena show with pyrotechnics. It's like, like everyone needs to learn stillness, and just like with, like a fighter jet flying overhead, and just like everyone's cheering, and they have foam fingers of you and like pictures of your face on their t-shirt, and like, we love you. And you're like, I'm just preaching, like, so to me, I mean, that's obviously like the hyperbolic, crazy, satirical extreme of this idea of, a philosophy or a set of ideas that are somewhat, not compatible with the sort of like capitalistic enterprise, but then having to exist inside of a capitalist landscape. It's like I think the tension is going to be inherent. I don't think there is like it will play out in different microcosmic ways where it's like the name versus the title, and like, it would be a statement to be, but like even the publisher is like, there's so many layers that we're trying to like trick ourselves into thinking we're absorbing actual truth, but it's really like just a better version of a commercial. And it's like, the idea would be like, oh, you publish this book that has no author, and that's the thing. And then like, oh, secretly it's this guy who And it's like, it is like this sort of like constant trying to one up the marketing aspect of it. And something you see now, I mean, on social media is that, the people are so inherently brand conscious, but the with performers and with authors and artists and creators, or whatever you want to call them, like they are the product. They are also the marketing brand. Like they are the logo and the product and the team and everything. And so, the delineation of like, like we've gotten rid of ads. It's like, we didn't. It's just the people just do them themselves. So it's like, if you were watching like a Simpsons episode back in the day, it would be like if in the middle of the episode, Marge just started talking about like Tide Pods, and you were like, what is going on? But that is now, that's just what we,
Well, I was thinking about this with your last special, not the most recent one, which I also really liked, but your decision to not have an audience, right? Like, is that an ego death decision? Is that an artistically brave decision? And so there's all of that. And then there's just like, well, now I'm watching it and it's different and it's not what I expect. And because it's different and not what I expect, I don't know how to interpret it, right? Like there's all these, like you realize, I was talking to Chuck Klosterman about this too, like there's all these sort of constraints, or it's tropes, the wrong word, but like standard practices, like in a medium, whether it's a book or a blog post or video or whatever. And if you push too far on the edges, it might be artistically daring, but then people are like, this makes me uncomfortable because it's different. And now I can't enjoy the thing the way that I might ordinarily do. It's like you realize like the audience is not just there for vanity, but the audience is also there to prime people, which feels artificial. But then without the artificial, it doesn't feel as organic. Like it's weird how these things, you take them for granted, but the architecture of them is actually really important.
Yeah, well, but they also, I think, deserve to be challenged. I mean, like on an artistic level. And I think like there is a difference, and maybe it's a subjective determination, but like I think there is a difference between, pushing the, like, I don't want to say push the envelope because that sounds cliche, but like, challenging some preconceived notion of what is and what should be on an artistic basis. Like let's experiment, let's play with this form in a way that people haven't, and in a way that maybe seems suitable to this actual thing, not just as a gimmick. And I think like that there's a big difference between that and then being a reactionary who is, essentially taking like what is currently in the zeitgeist, what the discourse is, and then trying to essentially become so outrageous or so noticeable by their hot take or reactionary, like that's kind of in the somewhere in like the podcast land. And also you could probably say Trump was probably a big, inadvertent proponent of that philosophy. And it's just like, I think like they're both driven by the same thing, which is a desire to stand out, I think. But I think there is a difference between, somebody doing something artistically radical or versus somebody saying something that's trolling. So incendiary or so like inflammatory that it like becomes a thing that people can't ignore.
Well, no, there's a line between challenging convention, questioning artistic boundaries, and then trolling, right?
Sure.
And I think that line people don't understand well. And the tricky part is they both often get the same reaction. So it's hard to know.
Yeah. So right.
If you're doing it for the wrong reasons, you're like, oh, well, I have riled people up. I am being denounced. Right. Therefore, I must have succeeded. And it's like, no, you just like pulled your pants down in the middle of a room. This is like that's not being artistically creative. Like, you just did something that's like wildly inappropriate and unwanted. That's not the same as sort of coming up with some, interesting artistic statement.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right. I think like people have sort of co-opted the reactions that previously radical things or progressive voices, or I'm saying progressive not in like the political sense, but in like the challenging something that the status quo or something that currently existed. And that was obviously going to be met with a lot of pushback and offense and death threats and whatever. Lenny Bruce was arrested and Malcolm X was killed, and it's so like you're going to get that sort of hostility. And so it's just essentially isolating the hostility component and saying and reverse engineering it through whatever means necessary in order to generate the hostility, and then essentially rebranding that as I am like these people. I'm just so challenging to these people can't handle me. And that's an incredibly captivating thing to watch, just inherently. Like just people, like if you saw a bus fight, if you saw one person being the worst and 100 people trying to like fight them on a bus, you'd watch. It's like, I can't take my eyes off of that. And so, and then some people would start really getting invested in the one person, being like, oh yeah, I see myself in that dude. And like, now I will subscribe. I want to hear more. And I want this person to be like my avatar in this sort of public sphere. And I think that is, somewhat, it's obviously created like a pretty dangerous landscape where it's just like self-promotion trumps everything. Like, it's like, well, it's working. It's like, I'm selling out. It's like, yeah, but and to me, like, and not to get too into the weeds on the Trump thing, but like to me, Trump just kind of ended the idea that like selling tickets is the ultimate barometer. It's like, yeah, you can do this. Like, I think he does it exceptionally well. I think he is like he's talented at what he's doing in his own way, and like. But it's just like, what is this though? Like, what, like, is this cool? Like, I don't like, I guess it's cool in the sense that like you are taking on a lot of people, and some of those people do suck, but just because someone sucks and thinks you suck doesn't make you awesome.
Yes. Well, actually, J.D. Vance said this in one of the interviews he's doing. He's running for Senate in Ohio. Previously seemed like what was a thoughtful, reasonable human being, and then it sort of revealed himself to be a total piece of shit. But he was like, they're hated by the right people. He was like, I like this person because they're hated by the right people, or that they hate the right people. Right. And so it becomes this idea of like, look, are you this is kind of what my first book was about, which is like, are you optimizing for like doing cool stuff or saying stuff that's true or like questioning things that need to be questioned, or are you optimizing for the reaction?
Yeah.
Right. Are you optimizing for getting the people that you don't like to not like what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right. And I think a lot of people in comedy, in art, influencers, in politics, etc., have just said like, they've just dispensed with everything and said like, who do we want to piss off? This is where the sort of, they call this like owning the libs. Like if all I want to do is own the libs or get this group of people to disproportionately freak out, it really doesn't matter what I do, what I say, what I care. All that matters is, am I getting that reaction? And I have to imagine as a comic, you sort of distinguish between like earning a laugh and then doing something that gets a laugh. That like to an ordinary person, those might seem like the same thing, but there's like an honest way to do it and a dishonest way to do it. And there is a difference.
Yeah, no, for sure. And you made me think, just real quick, when you say your first book, is that Trust Me, I'm Lying, or is there something?
Yeah.
So that was how I was introduced to you. Is I think I saw an article you wrote about the alt-right, about how like I wrote the playbook that they're using, and it was inadvertent, obviously. And so that got me to read the book. And there are two books that I think I've sent to people the most. One is Antkind by Charlie Kaufman, and the other is Trust Me, I'm Lying by you. And the reason is because it feels almost like the sort of the updated version. Obviously, it's like a little bit more about blogosphere, which is maybe early 2010s, than it is like this hyper social media thing that is current. But like, I think so many of the principles still apply, but it feels like an update from, this sort of Edward Bernays outline of the sort of, public relations industry in the 20th century. And so this felt like, sort of that, distilled down to the elements that are relevant to new technology. And one of the things that I always quote from the book, I don't know if I quote it correctly, so apologies, but like just the idea of the emotional valence of something being the determining factor of how quickly it spreads or how rapidly or how much it proliferates, and just this idea that outrage and anger spreads. I think it was something in a 3-to-1 clip of even like the most beautiful happiness, kind of feelings. And so it just makes sense that the sort of algorithmic outcome of that is going to be that people are going to lean into the incentives of something spreading a lot. And so of course, like, I don't think it's even like scheming billionaire people. I think it's literally just robotic, like human manipulation that's occurring.
Or it just selects for crazy people whose own barometer, like we've all met people who are like, they stir up craziness. They go towards craziness. Right. And so like, this is their moment.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like Trump is in his late 70s, right? Like he's always been this way. And then culture aligned with his personality perfectly. Right. And so I think it's like, a normal person isn't like, I would love to be on a reality show on E. That's my scene. You know what I mean? But there is a kind of person who is perfectly designed for that crazy environment, right? And like, so it selects for those people.
Yeah.
They might not even know they're doing it. That's just who they are. And suddenly they're getting all the attention and love that they've always craved and not even known.
Yeah, it's like the warlord concept, where it's like, if it's a war-torn, crazy, lawless country or area or region, then only the, most ruthless and vicious person or group is going to survive that and emerge victorious. And so they'll essentially just be elevated by the circumstance. And there might be other people like that who just don't quite, whatever. But like, it's going to, like you said, self-select for that. I think that's what we're seeing now is like, it is self-selecting for the people who can present like, the stuff that gets people engaged, as they say. And doesn't matter. There's no Z-axis to engagement is the problem. Like there's like clicks and like time, but there's no like intensity or feeling or, there's no like, because sometimes somebody will have like 100 million views or something, and it's like, yeah, but did people connect to it, or was it just kind of passively seen? So there's no there's no way to really quantify that. I don't necessarily know if it should be quantified. Like, it's like, it's maybe slightly dystopian of like, I want to quantify like the level of attachment I feel for a piece of art. It's like, I don't know.
I don't know if you said this in the special or if you were just talking about an interview, but you got rid of social, right? You don't use social anymore. How has that changed your life?
I use social. I don't use Twitter. I don't use Facebook. I have an Instagram. But I would say I use it sparingly, and I have my brother helps me with some of the social stuff. And so like I have him, like he'll just upload videos for me into the algorithm just to kind of get them through there. But I'm not engaged with it. But Twitter, I deleted my account at the beginning of the pandemic. So sometime in 2020, and Facebook, I had deleted maybe like 4 years prior to that, or 3 or 4 years prior to that. And so, but I do think Instagram is like as vapid and whatever as it is. I think it's probably the least toxic of the three.
Weirdly, yes, because you can use it. It's not entirely comment based, right? Like the content is the thing. So you can look at the pictures and be like, I'm just not going to go down the rabbit hole of these toxic comments, but you can engage in the platform. It's like YouTube. YouTube is the worst community, but is the social network you can use without breaking your brain as much because you can just watch.
Yeah, I think Twitter probably is the worst because comments can become content, and that's like where it starts to go crazy. Like you can retweet a comment.
What is a comment? Even the tweet is a comment.
Right, exactly. Yeah. You're commenting to something that's either explicitly or implicitly, present. And Twitter felt like Instagram feels like the least cruel. Like there's the least space for cruelty on Instagram. I mean, obviously people get hate and all that kind of stuff, but like Twitter almost feels designed around that, where it's like you like the tone of it, like the inherent tone is, putting something down or calling something stupid. And I just feel like that, obviously that's at the core of it. So on the fringes of that, you're going to get like doxing and, rape threats and shit, where it's just like, horrendous stuff. And, I don't think I'm one of these people who's like, I can't take a little internet comment. It's like, it's fucking crazy. Like when that is like that barrage is coming at you, it's like not chill. And it's not like just the idea of people not liking your work. Like that's hard enough, but it's just like, this is, and I just don't understand, one, why anyone would do that at all. Like what it would take for me to log in, unless you're on some like 4D chess, like I'm going to troll because this is all nihilistic and we're all deserve nothing. But if you're like in earnest, you have your profile picture is you in like whatever jersey of whatever team you like. And you're like, have like your son like this. And then you like go in and you're like, yeah, I'm going to tell this person that he should kill himself. It's like, I don't know. Like I truly can't identify with that. Like I can identify with rage or whatever, but like to actually log in, to actually type it, to actually hit send and then sit back and be like, yeah, I fucking did something. And so that, but then also if I were the type of person who was inspiring that type of behavior on my behalf, I would seriously rethink everything that I was saying to the public. Because it's like, what am I doing? It's like if you're consistently dating someone psychotic, that's like, what are you doing? What are you putting out there that this is who's calling? If
everyone you meet's an asshole, you're an asshole also. That's how that works.
Say it one more time.
Oh, the expression is if everyone you meet is an asshole, right, you're probably an asshole. Like if there's something you're putting out in the world that you're getting back. It's reflexive.
Yeah, 100%. And so I don't know how someone cannot self-reflect at that point and be like, yeah, my fans threatened to kill your mom. That's just they're rambunctious. It's like, what are you inspiring here? Like it's like Joker Bane shit. Which
I remember I read this article that was like it was actually really funny. It was looking at like who uses the share buttons on YouPorn, because like each video has like a share, like just like YouTube, you can share it. And they were like, who posts pornography to their LinkedIn account, which was like one of the options.
Right.
That's as inexplicable to me as the people who use social media to like attack people that they don't like. I just like, I know it exists, right? Like I'm aware that it exists, but it's so incomprehensible to me that it may as well not exist because I don't understand it at that level.
Yeah, it's so absurd. And right, it's like, who would do this? And it's like, well, apparently
millions of people like that. That's the crazy part. It's like, who would do this? Millions of people.
Yeah, I mean, maybe like, you share it. I don't know how, I don't know what it would take for me to be like, even to like a friend, to be like, this is so good. I thought you would like this.
It's inconceivable.
Right.
It's inconceivable.
But people do it, or are those bots? Like people actually...
I don't know. It's inconceivable.
Maybe it's what it is, probably to Tumblr or something, because Tumblr has like all those, porn-esque Tumblr things.
It's you try to be empathetic. You try to go like, why do people do what they do? This is like a philosophical principle, right? Like, what? Get inside their brain and why is it working? And you're just like, I just can't. It doesn't make any like I've tried it and I'm now even less sympathetic because it's so inconceivable.
Right. Because before it was like, oh, if I only just put myself in their shoes, I would maybe have a chance of bridging the gap. But like then you do it and you're like, yeah, it's even more alien. And I actually think I hate it more now because...
I'll give you a crazy one that I was thinking about. Okay, so like I live in this small town outside Austin, and we try to be like a good participant in the communities. Mm-hmm. It's like all of a sudden there's just like little things that you're asked to do that you're not asked to do if you like live in New York. Like they're like, hey, can we put up this sign for our fundraiser like in the window of your store? And I'm like, shit, I have to like think, do I have a policy about this? Anyways, they came by. I guess a police officer in town was like shot and injured in the line of duty. Right? My dad is a police officer. That's terrible. I don't like that. But the poster they wanted me to hang up was a raffle for an assault rifle for his benefit. Right? So like they were coming in, they're like, hey, we're giving away effectively a machine gun to raise money because a police officer was injured in a shooting in the line of duty. And so you're like, look, these are like decent people. They mean well. Clearly they're trying to help this injured person. And you go like, maybe if I just thought about it from their point of view, I would be more. And then I was thinking about it and I'm like, this is the most insane thing that I'm so much less sympathetic having thought about it because it's maybe clear to me that they didn't think about it at all. Like because if they thought about it, there's really only one conclusion. It's not even, it's worse than ironic. It's obscene. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
It's obscene.
Right. It's like, one of the neighbors' kids has leukemia and we're trying to raise money for his hospital bills. And so we're going to have Mandingo fights to raise money. It's like, can I just put like a couple bucks in like a good Kickstarter or something? Like, why are we doing? Yeah, like why are we trying?
When it's like our solution to this problem is to contribute significantly to the problem. That's like what we want to do. What are you talking about?
Yeah, like it. Right. It's but then it becomes like, and this is maybe the next layer of that. I don't even know if that's what they were called. I was pulling that reference from Django and I think everyone gets the context of it. But then it's like, I don't want to do that. And then it's like, oh, you hate whatever the thing that they're raising money for. It's like, no, I hate how you're doing it. I'm totally like, yeah. And honestly, like, if you're doing it that way, it makes me like, so who was this guy?
Yeah, the juxtaposition is horrible. Like, what are you talking about? Right. Well, actually, you know what? I was thinking about this. This is a good segue to something you talk about in this special, I'm pretty sure. Were you talking about, or maybe it was before, you're talking about, you read the Unabomber manifesto.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And you were like, I get it. Like, I get what he's talking about. Like, the weird part is you study history and it gets really complicated really quickly. And then like, if you're kind of stuck there, you're like, well, what about this? What about this? Hey, the states' rights was a part of the Civil War, right? And then
Right.
you think about it some more, and it gets simple again because you're like, wait, what did they want the states' rights for? Oh yeah, slavery, right? So like the paradox of like, it's like you don't think about it, you think about it, then you really think about it. These can get you to kind of similar places.
Yeah.
And so I think some people are just like, whatever, who cares?
Right. Well, yeah, exactly. And the context of that bit was basically like, I don't want to read anymore, because anytime I read something really interesting, it just teaches me or exposes me to an idea that's essentially incompatible with everyday life. And it's like, because inherently, if you find something that's truly like, it breaks ground in your mind and it feels like new, it's going to at least partially run counter to everything. And so, it's just like there is a social adaptability factor that I think sometimes knowing a lot and being really in depth in knowledge, not that I am that person, but just even on a small level. And so, yeah, the Unabomber Manifesto, which like outside of, it's just funny, like outside of the killing, which isn't really talked about in the manifesto. I mean, there's like some maybe like latent sexism and stuff like that. And so but like in terms of principles, his the points he's making,
as deranged as you would think.
Yeah, he's a genius. Like he's not, he spent 7 years or whatever in a cabin just reading about sociology and living in the fucking, wilderness. And like he was literally like, Abe Simpson, where he's like old man yells at a cloud. Like that was literally him. He was yelling at airplanes as they would fly overhead. But he's a Luddite, and he talks about, like the corruption of this essentially modernized, tech society on human psychology. And I don't think that's like that controversial necessarily. I think it's like, yeah, but I mean, some people are like, yeah, so the best way to deal with that is to like stop doing all this, tear it down and start, in like a sort of like pseudo agrarian commune thing. And it's like, right, that might not even be wrong, but like, that's also just impractical. Like, we're not gonna, like, nobody's gonna be on board for that. Nobody is gonna be like, yeah, let's just tear this all to pieces.
When also when you study history and you're like, oh yeah, they tried that in the Great Leap Forward and they tried it in Russia and it was horribly awful for just different reasons,
right.
Anyways, I remember, that expression like those who don't study history are deemed to repeat it, right? And like I saw a meme that I think about all the time. It's like, actually, that's not true. Those who study history are doomed to watch in terror as leaders repeat it, right? So it's like there is this paradox of knowledge. Like if you've studied history, if you have a sense of like how things have gone historically, it doesn't matter. Like, sure, if you're the president, it's good to have studied history. But for the rest of us, it just means like, where the roller coaster is going and you're strapped in and you just have to sit there in impotent terror knowing this is going to be really awful.
Yeah, right. You could identify immediately what this, what analogy this evokes and be like, oh, that's going to be bad. And then continue to just have nothing to do about it. Right. Like yeah. Well, that speaks to like a general sense of like powerlessness in a society with so much, inertia that has nothing to do with you. And a friend of mine made a point, and maybe it wasn't his point, but it was just like the things that really, like, if you're talking about fundamental momentum of society, like the things that can really upend that, like truly, it's really just technology, war, maybe like biochemical disease or environment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, no protest has ever really shifted like the bigger tectonics of things. And that's not to say that they're futile. I mean, obviously, like, there are societies existing on top of like these bigger, plates of sociology or whatever. But like it's like if you're protesting like something bigger or at least is a byproduct of something much bigger, it sucks because it's like, I don't want to be, I'm not nihilistic at all. I don't think that like nothing you do matter. I don't believe any of that, but it's also like, I don't know what to do. I mean, like, because right, educating yourself seems to be just making yourself furious at how not right things are going. And then like how like granularly how not right it is. It's like, oh, I used to think it was like fucked up, but now I could write like a dissertation on why it's fucked up. But it doesn't necessarily. I don't know. I don't. It gets hairy because it's like I don't want to say like, oh, fuck it, because then that's worse. And so I don't know what the answer.
Well, it's funny. Like we talk about like, you know, we have the children's story like Chicken Little. It's like the sky is falling, and no one believes you. But like the ancients had the myth of Cassandra, like the person who can see the future and lays out exactly what's going to happen, just nobody listens. Mm-hmm. And so the idea, like, you know, we're like, oh, this is so unprecedented, like whatever we're going through right now. It's like, this is very precedented. This has happened like 1,000 times. And this is exactly more or less how it's going to go. That's not to say we're powerless to do anything about it. In fact, there's a lot we can do about it. It's just also understanding we're not going to do anything about it. And that's kind of that's where you get into the nihilism. You're like, here, like, it's like watching what's going to happen politically. It's like, it is a Trump reelection inevitable? Like, not in any sense that like he's super competent and is unstoppable in that sense, but is it likely that the people who can and should stop him will get their act together anytime soon? No, because
who could? Here's my question is like, he's the most popular, like he has the biggest, like when he was president, I think he was the most famous person to have ever lived at the time of their life.
I think currently, you probably say that even
right now. Yeah, but I'm just like, but everything was going through that guy. I mean, like, obviously, you know how you have historical figures who are more famous, but like not at the time of their life. I think Trump he's at least up there. And so,
well, you mean you go back historically, like you take Alexander the Great. Like, let's say everyone knew who he was, but how many people could hear directly from Alexander the Great or knew what Alexander the Great looked like
or thought?
Right? Like,
yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly. It was crazy. But I mean, he has been stopped once. I mean, he did lose an election.
Yeah, but he didn't lose to anyone. He just he lost to not him.
But so I'm saying it's not actually impossible. But you could, Trump is so loaded, you could insert anything. It's like, you know, is disaster from climate change inevitable? Not in the sense that there's nothing human beings can do about it, but is it likely that human beings will do anything about it?
Right.
The pandemic wasn't inevitable either, right? Like there were lots of things we could have done, and you can look at other countries that did things differently. Obviously, we're all in the same boat in that nobody like perfectly stopped it, but like it's like human beings have the agency and the ability to bend the arc of history. It's just most of the time they don't, and that's what lends one to nihilism, because you're just sort of like, yeah, I guess it can change, but it won't. So well,
yeah, and I've tried to, and maybe this is like a privileged position or something, but I've tried to localize my efforts, and I don't mean it even in like the community sense. I mean like on the individual basis, like, you know, because I think that there is something to be said for, you know, being highly involved in big abstract complex topics. Sure. And then at the same time, you know, your personal relationships, your relationship with yourself is dysfunctional. I think that like that's actually like you're doing more, most of your impact is done on like the interpersonal level. Just like, unless you're, you know, one of 100 people, you know, unless you're Elon Musk or whatever, like I think you and I, even as people who speak to the public, whatever, like I think the relationship that you have with yourself and with the people closest to you, that's going to echo out in your communication. And so it's like, that seems to be of the utmost importance, is to maximize and you know, find harmony in that. And I'm sure, I mean, I'm talking to someone who preaches on you know, something adjacent to that. And so I have found some solace in the sense of like, these are problems that I can solve. Like I have my own personal issues that I need to work through. That doesn't negate the need for bigger, changes and all of that. But I think like, it's similar to the, you're on an airplane, like put your oxygen mask on before helping the person next to you. It's like I'm really of no good to anyone if I'm just like this ball of unbridled anger or frustration, but that sometimes is triggered by like the state of the world. But I think a lot of that is also internal for me, at least. I mean, obviously, like, if I'm Black living in America, for example, like I would imagine like the anger that's mine is put upon me in a way that I don't think necessarily I obviously can't relate to that component of it. But there are, everyone has their own external and internal factors. And I think like trying to manage those and then spread that out to the relationships that you have with people seems to be a way to, move.
Yeah, I was reading this piece that this woman, she found out like later in life that her father, who was like a doctor but kind of worked for the government, his sort of secret job was that he was tasked with like preparing a plan / protections for the president in case Washington, D.C. was struck with nuclear weapons, right? So he had all this, here's where the president's going to go, here's the medical care he's going to get, blah, blah, blah. But that like, there was obviously no stipulations for like this random guy's family, right? So she was reflecting on what it must have been like for her father to plan for like a sort of end of the world scenario that he had professionally an obligation here, but personally would have to also consider would be the end of everything and everyone that he cared about.
Right.
And so how did he like just go through her life? Like, how did he just every day live with that? And she was sort of reflecting on that during the pandemic. She's like, well, it's similar. Like, what do I do? She's like, I don't know. You make sandwiches, you drive kids to school. Like you just live your life. I thought it's sort of a beautiful and then also kind of like bittersweet idea of just like, what do? You just try to be a good person and do the little things that are in your control for the people that you care about. And it's not that you just like hope for the best. It's just like you don't even think about that because there's nothing you can do about it. It just is. And it's always been there. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not like we like to think of the past as like, as whatever, but it's like, you think the Romans weren't walking around knowing the city could get sacked and they would all get murdered in an instant? Like the threat of existential destruction has always existed. Right. It's not new.
And I think there is like, right. So we are like one of two things is true. Either we are acutely under that threat right now, or like the most self-conscious generation is living in the world where everyone has throughout history constantly thought the world was going to end. But for us, like, we're like, but it's going to happen to us though. Like, it's like, but we're the ones who it's definitely going to happen to. And so, that's not me negating any sort of like, scientific understanding of where things are in the world right now. But like I don't know, like something like that is too big for me to like fully come down on one side or another. I'm just like, yeah, I mean, my argument for changing the way we behave via like climate change is like, even if you don't believe in climate change, it's like, it's still like nice to have a nice clean earth.
It's right. It's like
not doing my dishes isn't gonna end the world, but I do them. Like, I don't want dirty dishes in my sink. That's gross. It's like not. So it's like, yeah, maybe don't pump smoke into the air. Like, it's bad. Like you don't want to breathe smoke. You don't want to like toxic sludge in the water. You don't want, species to be getting slaughtered. It's just like, that's just not nice. It's not good vibes.
But isn't that weird? Because that is a historical constant, right? Like whether it's segregation or environmental, you're just like, this is asking, or wearing a mask during a pandemic. It's like, we're not asking you to change everything. We're asking you to do this very minor thing, like do your own dishes, don't dump toxic sludge out of your company's trucks, or whatever. Let people who want to come into your restaurant come into your restaurant. This is so fucking minor, but like the historical constant throughout history has been like, oh, you're asking me to do that? Now I definitely don't want to do that.
Right. It's like,
even though it's good for me, but now that you've asked me to do it, I'm not going to do it out of spite.
I do think, I mean, how much of that is American though? Like specific, I mean, obviously like there's a human element to that, but I do think there's like a specifically American resistance to, I mean, obviously it exists elsewhere, but like, I just feel like there's maybe slightly, there's something about like
definitely,
the don't tread on me kind of thing where it's like, if the government demands, but it's like, yeah, I don't know. Like we have all these other things. Like I remember there was one, I think, I don't know who it was, but you can find it. There was one guy, this was like during Thanksgiving, I think 2020 Thanksgiving, when it was really bad. And there were all these mandates on like how many people you could have in your home. Right. And there was this one guy, I want to say like a senator or a congressman or something like that, where he said, this is ridiculous. Like, you're going to tell me the government is going to tell me how many people I can have to a private event. This is like a family time. This is that. I'm going to have as many people as I want, provided that I, follow all the, fire and safety codes. I'm just like, that's its own governmental restriction based on some data that, and listen, I'm not saying that
you only don't like this one because it's new.
Exactly. It's like the ones that already exist. It's like, that's not, they're neutral, like the restrictions that already exist. Like, I feel like if we didn't have traffic lights, people would protest the idea of traffic lights. If they're like, we're gonna institute traffic lights, like, fuck you, tell me how fast I can go. Like, I'll go wherever. It's like, I don't know.
But I mean, there were like in not our lifetime, but our parents' lifetime, like people didn't like laws against seatbelts. I mean, do you remember like when it was like 2007, 2008? I remember I was living in California and they passed a thing that said like you couldn't use your phone while driving. And I remember people were like, who are you to tell? Like, I'm good at it. What, like these things are like, it's always happening. And our instant reaction is always, why should I give up something that's easy or comfortable or convenient for me for somebody else's benefit?
Yeah. And well, I think like that goes to like just an inherent lack of trust in society and not feeling like it's actually connected to anything. Feel like it's like I feel like, I think, a lot of people have written about this, but Eric Fromm has written extensively about like the atomization of, in the wave of suburbia and just like the way that, the sort of American landscape had progressed in the 20th century. And just like, and obviously, I mean, it's even crazier now. But there is this idea of that it's like me, and then there's everything. There's like me, I am in this like one column, and then everyone has their own columns, and like, yeah, we're all like together, but we're not really bound by, there's the flag, there's their taxes, there's the military, there's, geography. But other than that, we're not really bound by a sense of community or common idea. And I'm not saying, maybe it's not possible for, 350 million people to do that without it being like China-esque or something, but like, I don't, so it's just like, if you were in a relationship, for example, if just two people where it's like, you're dating someone, you care about them, friendship, whatever it is. And it's like, hey, this, when you show up 20 minutes late, it makes me feel like you don't, like that I don't matter. And it's like, I'd appreciate it if you could be respectful of my time. Hopefully the response you get is like, oh, I'm really sorry. Like, yeah, it's something I struggle with and I had to do better because I don't want you to feel like that. And it's like, that isn't removing your liberty. It's like, you're trying to make something work. And so I think that like, yes, there can definitely be overreach 100%. And we probably have a ton of that, there is still, it's like, there isn't like that. This is why, the true, like hardcore libertarian has never, I'm just like, this is like missing so much of what makes this possible. And also like, yeah, I don't want to get too far in the weeds on that, but like, I just think like there's no
Well, the libertarian thing is interesting because if they were like I would buy it more if they're like, the government can't tell me to do it. I'm still going to do it. I just don't want you to tell me to do it. But those two never seem to go together, right?
Well,
right. It's never like I hate mandates, but I'm obviously wearing a mask or vaccinated. It's like it's ultimately the objection is like, I don't want to do it and no one should do it. Right. I would love a world in which more things were voluntary, provided, it's like, I would love not to have to tell my kids what to do. Right. Like, I'd love them just to like intuitively do all the right things. But since they don't, I have to be the parent, right? Like, it's not my preferred mode of living, but like, stuff has to operate a certain way or shit falls apart.
Yeah, I think, right. That's essentially just what society is. And I think there's like, if people had, but again, like your kids have trust in you, and there's like a mutual trust where like, but I think even the paternal analogy, I think, would turn people off, like this idea that the government is here to take care of us. And, even though the people who hate that, that's what Trump kind of ran on. And no one's consistent. It's just, I don't know. I don't have any answers. I know nothing.
Well, I remember listening to your interview with Marin. I remember messaging you about it. I think it's not just like, hey, government has consistently let us down. I'm skeptical. I also think generationally we've been let down. Like I went through this with my parents. It sounds like you kind of went through it with your parents. So people, the real root of the trust is they're like, I've never actually seen someone whose job it is to be responsible, or, you know what I mean? And so I think there's like sort of, there's also this, like when you kind of lay out like the arc of the boomers, it is like one set of betrayal after another for like the younger generation. And then they're like, kids these days, it's like, fuck you.
Right. It's like you're talking about essentially like an intergenerational like dysfunction, like on a family level.
Trauma.
Just like, but it's like just applying it to like on the societal level, where it's like, if you see your parents not, like you said, being like the way that they should be, then you have no model for what that even looks or feels like. And so you can kind of try to replicate it by deduction, where you're like, yeah, okay, it's not bad. So I'm taking a stab at like the inverse of that, which is all other possibilities, which is like pretty big, and so there's a lot of trial and error. Or, obviously this is where like personal work, therapy, whatever your mode of getting at some of these things and working them out is, and trying to like, reconnect with yourself in a way that is meaningful and that is, healthy, so that by extension, that the way that you kind of, interact with everyone else will be. And so I don't know how to necessarily apply that to the like the massive scale, but I do think that like, again, going back to, if you do it, like if you yourself do it, and then you are with people who also foster that same kind of, I just feel like so many of the people that I find myself like bothered by, it's not even like their opinion that I disagree with. It's like this idea, and this is something I talked about in the last special, this idea that like someone's emotional subspace and their intellectual ideology or belief system are completely separate. Like, to me, it's like, it's either like ignorance or it's willful disavowal of something true. And it's like, like the Ben Shapiro kind of ethos of like, facts don't care about your feelings. Like this idea that reason detached from feeling is like a virtue, and it's like that's like the true way. It's like, I don't know how you could interact with a human with that. And it's like, so take that on the social scale, and it's just like, no, if you feel a certain way, if you feel attacked or you feel, threatened, you're going to believe things that are based on that disposition. And so you're going to take the stance of a person who's threatened, a person who feels like the world is hostile. But if you yourself don't feel that way, if you feel trusting, if you feel loving, then there's going to be a lot more, I don't want to say empathy, but there's going to be a lot more just sort of like openness to certain things. And I think that those things 100% shape ideology. I don't think ideology and a person's emotional disposition are at all distinct.
Yeah, I read this really good book called Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents.
Oh,
it was very.
I meant to tell you. You emailed me about that book. I bought it and read it. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, super helpful.
Yeah, I think obviously that was helpful with me understanding my parental situation, but it's also just helpful understanding human beings. Period. Right? Like it's like, oh, you're emotionally immature. I don't mean that like condescendingly or like dismissively. I just mean you're struggling with this because it's hard. There's this financial podcast I like, and he talks about people who are savvy with money and people who are not, and how people who are not savvy, they fall for tricks. They have like an expensive car loan because they went in and they were like, what does this car cost per month? Right? Which is not how a person who understands how math or budgets or, investing thinks about it. They're like, how much is the car? Right? Like not like, oh, it's $200 a month times 97 payments. Like, no, a smart person doesn't, that's not the right word. A savvy person doesn't think that way. An emotionally mature person understands, oh, I'm dealing with some feelings. I'm going to calm down for a second before I vomit all over you or whatever. I need to go deal with it.
Or look them in the eye. And it's not even necessarily, oh, I'm hysterical, I need to calm down. It's just like I need to understand what I'm feeling and why. And you can address the feelings. You can be pissed off. Like being pissed off is okay. Yes. Like that pissed me off. You don't have to necessarily like let it go. But yeah,
you just try not to act on your pissed off feelings.
Yeah, not be motivated by. You don't want to be motivated by like a feeling that you're not aware of. You don't want to be like, but that happens so much. I mean, like we're all emotionally immature to some degree. I mean, like we're trying to learn, and it's similar to like the reading phenomenon where I was saying like, oh, reading just kind of teaches you things that people don't know, and then you're just like ostracized even further. And I feel like the same is true with, the more mature, the more introspective and the more reflective you become, and the more you actually try to like work toward it, like the more you're just like kind of like outpacing a certain accepted way of being. And it's just like, this isn't okay. Like, so for me, it's hard to like when there's growth and when there's certain things I'm like, oh, I don't tolerate that anymore because it's actually like either toxic or not good enough. Like it isn't like it's not, it lacks reciprocity or whatever, but that has its own like alienating quality. Cause then it's like, well, my disposition is alienation. Like I don't know. I grew up, I have a hearing loss that I grew up, and it went untreated for 20 years. It was known about, but like there was never anything done about it. And so, I mean, we tried doing stuff and I didn't want to, my parents weren't really involved in it. It just wasn't, that's a whole other discussion. But so the first 20 years of my life was spent 21 years really, living with a very, very, very serious hearing impairment, and without any correction, without anyone even really knowing. I kind of faked it to such a degree that, now I'm 36 now, and it's like still very much starting to get to like the root of some of that stuff, but like how much I was doing, how separate it kept me from everyone, not just in the physical sense, like I couldn't hear, but like the emotional sense of like I wasn't able to communicate what was going on. I didn't even know what was going on inside me. I was working like extra hard to just barely get by. And I think that was causing a lot of distress, and I was never able to be myself because I had to just constantly, and then, so, that would lead me to like crave solitude, but then that was fucking lonely. And so it's just like this sort of like double-edged sword of alienation. And so that is something that I've always dealt with, where I look at myself as separate from the world. I look at the world as hostile toward me. I look at, people as agents of danger, and so that has definitely dictated how I saw things and the way I believed. I mean, I have this old bit about depression, about how like, is depression, like isn't depression just a natural reaction to this fucked up world? And it's like, aren't happy people the ones who need to be medicated? Like, if you're happy in this world, like, what the fuck is wrong with you? And it's a bit that a lot of people liked and responded to, but I think what I got wrong in it is that, like, I was using like my perspective as a way to justify my feeling, as opposed to vice versa, where it's like, no, I'm seeing the world this way because I feel this way about myself, or I'm struggling with this type of, emotional issue. Whereas if I felt like I had a healthier, more stable disposition, yeah, those things are true. Like, you can always find something fucked up in the world. Like, the world isn't like, but it's kind of a, it's kind of a Rorschach, where it's like, the world is just, there's amazing things that happen in the world all the time. And to not look at any of them and to not have them count for anything, I think says more about your own disposition than like some ultimate truth about the world.
Yeah. Susan Cain, who I love, her new book is called Bittersweet. And she's sort of talking about how melancholy is that kind of depressive outlet. But there's also, if done right, a sort of love of beauty and wonder and solitude. And so it's like, if you're only getting the negative part of it, you're probably doing it wrong. But if it's actually kind of shaped, it allowed you to create some inner world that you can retreat into, and it connected, like you can kind of choose to see it different ways, I guess.
Well, that's kind of the David Foster Wallace, is it This Is Water, or is it the other one?
Yes.
Where he's like, you can choose, and then he killed himself. It's like, that's a bummer.
Yes, that does undermine the argument slightly.
So we all know which one you chose.
Yeah. No, I think going like, hey, like going back to the emotional immaturity thing, I think what I've taken from it is like, okay, yes, explains why these people act the way they do. But it also explains why I act the way I do, because that was my model my whole life. And so, like, it's not like, how dare they? I'm angry. I'm resentful. That's what I'm going to carry around. I'm probably, whatever this argument I'm having with my wife is, chances are a good portion of my reaction is driven by a similar amount of emotional immaturity.
Right.
Because that's just like basic probability at this point. You know what I mean? And at the end of the day, all you can really do is direct that sort of towards your own behavior.
100%. When I read the book, I actually skipped the first half of it. I only read the second half of it because the first half of the book is like, are your parents emotionally immature? How to know? I'm like, yeah, they fucking are. Like, I don't need, like, I skimmed it. I was like, oh yeah, like, I've identified all of the things. But then when I started reading about, hearing like some of my own behaviors explained by someone who had never met me in like this sort of archetypical way, sometimes that feels restricting, but sometimes it's really, really, really comforting, because it's like, oh, this thing that I kind of just live with that is somewhat amorphous and nameless is being identified very clearly by someone impartial. And there's comfort in knowing that, like, oh, that's a thing, and it has a name, and it's brought about by these forces that seem to make sense. Like, I like it, I'm not like, okay, well, the book says, like, like, I'm like, no, it's, this resonates, and so, I think that's super helpful.
Yeah, and like, awareness doesn't magically solve the problem, but I think it's better than not being aware of it.
Wait, what did you say right before you switched back to the book? What was
I talking about? What was I talking about? I don't remember.
Me either. But I had something to say about it right before we switched. The choice thing. My one issue, and this is the David Foster Wallace thing, kind of like goes into that, because he killed him. Like I think there is this sort of reductive element to the idea of choice, of like, you can choose to see the world this way, you can choose to see the world this way. I don't know if it's that simple. I don't know if it's like this binary choice that one can make once and then that's it. I think it's like, it's deciding something more fundamental, deciding that like you matter, deciding that like you're somebody worth taking care of, and then like continuing to choose that all the time, as opposed to some people's default is to neglect themselves or abandon themselves and let them kind of just float in this abyss. And like, I don't think that's just a matter like getting out of that is not just a matter of like, oh, the world's so great, there's so many good, like actually when you're depressed, thinking about like how great things are, it's just worse because you feel so detached from it. I think it starts from, and not to like, I'm not trying to argue anything, but like there's an internal disconnect that like needs to be fed. And I think like the choice is like, I matter, my happiness matters. Like and some people feel that inherently, some people struggle with that. I'm somebody who struggles with that. And so I have to like make that choice. And then, have you read the Art of Loving? Not to bring up Eric Fromm again. Yeah, it's like a smaller, sort of less like academic book that he wrote, where he talks about love as an art rather than like a fleeting feeling or some like electric thing. It's in how it like any art requires practice and dedication and all these different things. And I think the same is true for yourself. Like, you see like these Instagram infographics that are like, love yourself. It's like, yeah, but that's not just deciding to do that. It's like loving yourself means when you're, doing things that are good for you, even when it's hard, going to bed on time and like taking care of your body, taking care of your space, taking care of your emotional, disposition and whatever, and like tending to yourself, doing things that are good for you.
Well, that's what I think about the bittersweet thing, right? It's not, I don't think it's like, oh, just choose to see the world as good. It's that it's bitter and sweet. Like the worldview that you were given by nature of what you went through, it's probably not what you would choose, but it's not only bad. Do you know what I
Totally.
mean? Like that like that's what I like. I don't particularly like bittersweet chocolate, but I understand there's two tastes going on at the same time. Do you know what I mean? Like that, to me, it's about that duality or that tension.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, I could be depressive, but I choose to be happy all the time. It's no, like because of what I went through, I have a level of understanding or appreciation or compassion or wisdom that like that I wouldn't have if I was just like everyone else, or if I was just given what I think I want. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I just think that's what, to me, what her book was about, was this idea of like, no, don't beat yourself up for looking at the world the way you look at it. Actually, this worldview is responsible for some of the great art and achievements and like of all time. And we can appreciate it. She's saying just the same way, like her first book was about introverts. And an introvert is not just a person who needs to be made into an extrovert. They have their own, like, it's good that they're that way. And that's a unique, special thing. And they should come to appreciate the strengths as well as the weaknesses in it. And I think that's kind of what she's saying about
Yeah. And that's a very challenging thing to do, to sort of reconcile the internal forces that at one point felt so overwhelming and so unmanageable and so like untamable, that, to kind of like harness them and to be able to coexist with them. And because I don't think you can necessarily do away with it. I think it becomes manageable to a point where it doesn't snowball, into like something catastrophic, which some people is like physical destruction, or is about self-harm, or, like drinking, drugs, sex, but for other people, it's like, that was never my thing. It was never like, it was more like internal stuff. Like I would shut down, my thoughts would get really, really, really negative, and really like, I would feel like, a million miles away from everybody. And that would make me want to like, reach out for some kind of compensation to that. And so, but everyone has their own way of like flailing in the water, like you're getting waterboarded. It's like, like your body's going to like, it's going to like react in a way. But yeah, it's something that I think a lot of, like you say, emotional maturity is required to parse through that.
I think that's right. Well, man, this was really fun. Let's get together in person again.
Okay.